All right, I actually have 1 o'clock, so I'm going to get started. This is Matt Mosconi, Director of CART, Kansas Center for Autism Research and Training. I want to welcome everyone to our webinar on managing the coronavirus crisis. As you can see here in this slide, these are the wonderful office homes we used to inhabit. We are all obviously doing this remotely and in order to maintain safety, and we hope that you are doing the same as well and managing more broadly. Before I get into the introductions, I want to go through a couple of pragmatic pieces and talk about the structure of this webinar. So first of all, everyone who has been coming on, we had actually over 200 individuals register for this webinar. So obviously this is something that people have felt is needed. As participants, as you all are coming on to this webinar, you've been automatically muted, and that is just to help with the flow of the overall webinar. And you can see, you should be able to see on your screen that the mute button or the microphone has a red slash through it. You are able to show your video. We encourage people to refrain from showing video while you're at home, but certainly that is up to you. Just remember that it is on unless you turn it off on your Zoom screen, so people could see what you're doing, and if you don't want them to, then go ahead and get rid of it. In the bottom center of your screen, as indicated on this slide, you'll see the chat button. If people haven't used Zoom before, some of us have been living on Zoom the past couple of weeks, but if you haven't been using Zoom, there is a chat feature there, and that's actually going to be quite important for the course of the next hour and a half. You can feel free to use that chat button to ask questions regarding the presentations, any of the presentations as we go. You can do that at any point. Any question that you ask is going to go directly to Dr. Catherine Unruh, who's one of our CART investigators. Catherine, you might want to wave hello, just so they have a face to know who's receiving those questions. But your questions will go automatically to Catherine as opposed to going to the whole group. And then Catherine's going to take those questions and ask them during our question and answer periods throughout the webinar. She will be asking those questions to the speakers. There will be 5 minutes for questions after each presentation. And then at the end, we reserved a significant amount of time for a longer Q&A period. I have no idea what that red scribble through my slides is. I've never seen that before, nor do I know how to get rid of it. So we're just gonna roll. Real briefly, I indicated that we are adapting to these stay-at-home orders. Oh, somebody got rid of it for me. That's great. We're adapting to these stay-at-home orders and have essentially shut down most of our in-person activities. I want to be clear about that, though. CART remains open. We remain open in the sense that we are still here to field phone calls and to receive emails and to respond to emails and questions that come up, which may be more acute and even more urgent now. We're just doing it remotely. So do feel free to be in touch with us. Don't refrain if you have questions, and otherwise would be contacting us. The same is true for ongoing research studies. In our lab, we're not actually doing any testing in person, but we still are enrolling for our research studies. This one that I've highlighted is a study in my lab. The contact information is in that yellow circle on the bottom right. We still are looking for participants, and even if we're just getting your name and information now, when we start doing in-person assessments, we will be in contact with you right away if that's something that you're interested in partaking in. Information in regards to both ongoing CART activities and then also resources that are needed at this unique time related to COVID-19 are available on our CART page. We know that people have many new questions dealing with situations that none of us had planned for and that are relatively unprecedented. So I would point you to the kcart.ku.edu webpage for resources and also information to contact us with questions. Here's the actual COVID-19 web resource that we've put together, and we are continually updating this COVID-19 resource. To be clear, the links that are on this page are links that we have looked through, combed through, so we're not just throwing everything out there that people are putting on the web. Somebody once told me that you can't trust everything on the web, and I believe that. So we have looked through these different resources, and we will continue to add to these resources, including putting the recording from this webinar onto this page when it concludes. So for our presentation today, our webinar today, as I already introduced, Dr. Catherine Unruh is an assistant research professor at KU and a KCART investigator, is going to be moderating. She'll move us along, make sure we stay on time, as well as be fielding your questions. Again, when you go to that chat icon and you ask a question, we'll go directly to Dr. Unruh, and then she'll ask the question to the speakers. My portion is relatively brief and almost complete. But right when I finish up, we'll move forward with a presentation by Dr. Lenny Swales, as well as Sean Swindler, who would discuss emotion coping and validation for the whole family during the coronavirus pandemic. And they will speak for 15 minutes, and then we'll do 5 minutes of your questions at the end of that. We'll then roll into Dr. Skylar Bellinger, who's going to talk about visual supports and practical strategies to use at home. And she will speak for 10 minutes, and at 1:45, from 1:45 to 1:50, we'll do questions. And then Dr. Renee Jameson will wrap things up in terms of presentations and speak till 2 o'clock, and we'll do 5 minutes of questions, and then we'll invite the whole panel back to do a Q&A. So again, as you're going through this, if you think of questions related to the first presentation, but we're already in the second one, don't worry about it. Keep sending us those questions, and we'll make sure we get to as many of them as we possibly can. So that's essentially it for my portion. I will say before we move on and before we start with Dr. Swales' presentation, that one, we're going to try to stay on time as close as possible. And the reason for that is we know that there may be some people that have to be in and out and might be tuning into certain segments of this. And so we're going to try to stay on that fixed timing. And it actually looks like I might even be done a little bit early, in which case we're actually going to wait until Dr. Swales' scheduled start time, just in case there are people that are tuning in right then. The second piece that I did want to make sure to indicate is that we've been talking about this webinar for a number of weeks now. This date was originally scheduled to be our annual Across the Lifespan conference, in-person meeting. And when it became increasingly clear that that was not going to continue, that we would not be able to do that, we started discussing how best to reach out to the community and provide the services that that would be needed, that would be desired. This took a lot of work, and I wanted to thank, first of all, Drew Rosen, as well as Jen Humphrey at the Lifespan Institute have been really critical in managing and making sure that we could actually conduct this, this webinar. Doctors Unruh and Jameson have been instrumental in helping us structure this and work through how best to approach it. Sean Swindler also has just been involved in every aspect of this, and I wanted to thank him publicly. And then Dr. Lenny Swales and Skylar Bellinger just sort of jumped into this with both feet and said, yes, we'll be part of this. What do we need to do? And so I'm very grateful for this team that has jumped right into this and said, we're all sort of struggling to an extent, but we need to be present and we need to reach out. And so judging by the number of participants, the number of people, the number of you that have registered for this meeting, I think that their efforts are very well taken, and we hope to continue to provide similar types of resources and supports for the community. So that is all that I had planned to say. And so we are going to move to a silent period of 5 minutes.
Matt, we have a quick question.
Sure.
Yes. So I know that we're going to be recording the talk, but then the actual PowerPoints, are our presenters comfortable with sharing those as a PDF on the website too? Yes. Okay, great.
Yes, and so we can put those on that COVID-19 website as well, so you'll be able to get the slides as well as a recording of this broader webinar on the website. Okay, so I'm going to mute myself, and we will start with Dr. Swale's presentation at exactly 1:15. Okay, thanks.
I was thinking that we could play some music again there, Lenny.
I know, I was thinking maybe she should have, again, prepared another routine for this time.
I have requests coming in. I also want to thank you, Matt, for pulling all this together and being willing to continue, even though the conference didn't go as planned. Just really jumping in and letting us put something together for the families that hopefully will be valuable to. I know it's certainly been valuable for me to just go through the materials, because even though we're directing this to our autism community, it's certainly applicable, I think, to all families.
So I'll mention logistically, after this session, you're going to be getting an email with an evaluation form to fill out. And we would really like everyone to fill out that evaluation. It's helpful for us to get the feedback. And it's also helpful because you'll have an opportunity to give us some input on other types of sessions you would like to see. So as soon as this is over, you'll be getting an email, and definitely would love to have your feedback on everything you saw, and also what we can do to better support our families through this.
For other psychologists out there, there's often we talk about in therapy that you have to let the awkward silence be there. And that's something that's always really challenging for me. And also something that's always really challenging, I think, for new psychologists and new people as they're getting started in the field. So even though I'm going to wait on maybe starting with the content, I think I might just go ahead and kind of introduce myself a little bit, and maybe Sean could do the same too. So my name is Lenny Swales. I'm a psychologist at KU Medical Center. My area of focus is on clinical care for behavior and mental health related concerns for individuals who have autism spectrum disorder and neurodevelopmental disabilities. I'm also really focused on kind of the whole family therapy approach to things. And in addition to my clinical work, I do quite a bit of teaching and research and community grants and activities too. So I'm really excited to be here today to be talking about emotion regulation. Sean, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Sean Spindler at the Kansas Center for Autism Research and Training. And I know a lot of the folks I've seen who's registered, and I work on all of our community partnerships with all of our agencies and our family groups, et cetera. I'm also the parent of a 19-year-old with autism, and have personally experienced what it's been like to have school canceled, to have access to preferred community activities curtailed or eliminated, and to have a lot of uncertainty in having to answer those questions about how to deal with some of the uncertainty that we're facing.
Great. So Sean and I are going to be talking now a little bit more about emotion regulation and also coping and validation for the whole family. So Sean, I'll let you talk more about this piece here.
So the first thing to recognize is that this is an unprecedented situation. This really is a historical event. When we hear grandparents talk about what it was like to be around during World War II or doing some of these other major events with Pearl Harbor, this really is a major historical event that we're undergoing right now, both in a pandemic, which really hasn't happened to the scale since 100 years ago, and in our community response to the pandemic, because what we're seeing is really an unprecedented level of our entire country coming together to keep everybody safe and to work together to make sure that we can minimize the impact on life with regard to this. And so this is an unprecedented time that we're experiencing, and nobody has the answers in terms of what this is going to look like and what our community's response is going to look like, what it's going to look like to go into Walmart when people have masks and there are different social rules for personal space. All of these kinds of things happen, or have a big impact on our kids with autism and on our families working with our kids with autism. And so the real important thing is to recognize that there's a lot of unknowns. Things are changing on a daily basis. We don't know when the peak is going to be. We don't know what time it's going to be okay to get together socially again. We don't know what summer activities are going to look like, what sporting events are going to be held. Those are all unknowns that everybody is facing. And so we have to embrace those unknowns and understand that our families are experiencing the same thing everybody else is. And one of the things that's helpful sometimes is to recognize that sometimes things aren't about autism. Sometimes things are about general anxiety and uncertainty. A lot of kids and a lot of families are experiencing a lot of anxiety, and some of this has nothing to do with autism. Some of this has to do with that general piece. But we also know that for our kids, that dealing with structure and dealing with sameness and dealing with expectation is really, really important. And so today, one of the things you'll hear about in future sessions is looking at those small daily routines, looking at how we can structure the day and respond to our kids' anxiety in a way that that hopefully helps us make it through it. But it's just important to recognize that we are going to get through this, and we're all going to learn a lot about not just our neighbors and our communities, but our own families in terms of how they respond to these.
So I think the other thing too is as we're kind of setting our own expectations, which will hopefully help everyone cope better with this unusual situation. I think there's a lot of expectations that as parents you're putting on yourself too. And I think it's important to know, so there's this idea of the good enough parent. I don't know if other people have heard this kind of concept before, but the idea is that you don't need to be the perfect parent. There is no such thing as a perfect parent, first of all, but also your child doesn't need you to be the perfect parent. There's even research kind of talking about like, okay, well, if a parent is even a little bit better in this area and better in this and better in this and better in this, does it make their child have better outcomes? But the truth is there's kind of a level where you just need to be the good enough parent. And that's all that your child needs from you. And I think kind of accepting that for yourself as a parent can hopefully relieve some of the anxiety and recognize like, no, you're not going to be perfect because your child doesn't need you to be perfect. And your child's not going to be perfect either because no one is perfect. But we both can be good enough. And so kind of accepting that, I think, can help everyone feel a little bit more, more reasonable. I think the other thing is to be reasonable about what are we actually going to get done each day. What's reasonable to accomplish each day with your child's schooling? What is reasonable for me to accomplish each day as far as getting stuff done around the house? What's reasonable to accomplish each day when it comes to your work too, as you're juggling potentially working from home at the same time that you're parenting your child? So kind of let's think about what's actually reasonable to accomplish and focus on that. And you know, this isn't necessarily the time for Pinterest perfect parenting. And then Sean, do you want to talk a little bit about picking battles too? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, one of the other important things is to recognize that we have upended everybody's routine, our routines as parents, and the routines that certainly the routines our children have. And so some of the things that we have in mind that we want them to accomplish or that we want to accomplish, we have to weigh this quality of life factor, and we have to weigh whether our outcome is really worth the battle that we're putting in. An example is we're going to declutter the house while everybody's home and try to do a big household cleanup. And if that's even more change for your child with autism, maybe some of those plans need to be restructured or done in a different way. Likewise, we'll talk a little bit more about some replacement activities, knowing that if my child is receiving a lot of social validation and practice doing different skills during their school day, what are some ways we can replace that, but keeping in mind that it's not possible as a parent for you to replicate all of your child's IEP and therapy goals. I've talked to a lot of parents during this, and there's a major concern for the school sending home a lot of work, and we'd like to get through all of this work, and we'd like to continue to make progress on this IEP. But the reality is that the quality of work that's coming home in terms of whether it's really been adapted for your child with autism, especially if it's an academic class where they need accommodations, that may not have been done in a way that makes it easy to implement at home. And likewise, if there are goals from a speech therapist, an occupational therapist, things like that, there are some things we can do, but we're not speech therapists or occupational therapists. And so it's important to keep in mind that you can accomplish what you can accomplish, and it's okay to make quality of life the main idea that's guiding what the activities are. So it's okay to say to a school or a teacher, you know, we're not going to get this done because my child's not responding to my math instruction. My child's not responding to this lesson when I try to do it, or his dad tries to do it with them. And it's okay to say we're shutting that down and we're going to focus on something different, or to ask for an alternative activity that's going to be a more positive experience.
So when we're thinking more about kind of the emotions of living through the COVID era and social distancing, I think it's helpful to kind of go back to the basics in some way about what are some of the strategies that work for handling emotions in other situations too. So a lot of people might be familiar with the idea of cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's based on this idea that the way we feel about a situation is going to impact and also be impacted by what our specific thoughts are, or what the messages are we're telling ourselves. And then similarly, our behaviors, the actions we choose to take, is going to be impacted by our emotions and impacted by our thoughts, but also it's going to impact those things the other way too. So as an example, some thoughts you might be having as a parent during this time is, I'm a terrible parent for giving them so much screen time. Or your kid might be thinking, I'm going to be stuck in this house forever. And then some of the behaviors you might be doing, if those are what your thoughts are, could be things like sitting and watching TV all day, focusing on the news and just kind of letting that play, staying inside or scrolling through Facebook. And we all know that those actions aren't going to make us feel better, and in fact could make us feel worse. And so then it's also important to think, is there a way I can reframe this? Is there a way I can recognize when I'm having these thoughts that may be unhelpful? And is there a way I can change that? So for example, instead of thinking I'm a terrible parent for letting them watch so much screen time, maybe it's more of, this is an unusual situation and it's okay for them to have more screen time. If you're thinking I'm stuck in here all day, remind yourself or remind your kid, we're going to go outside this afternoon. We will not be stuck in here forever. And then similarly, thinking about what are your behaviors? What are the things that you're doing throughout the day? And are those going to be leading to you feeling better or leading to you feeling worse? So things like scheduling in social time, which Dr. Jamieson is going to be talking more about later, making sure you're limiting your news exposure and your child's news exposure to maybe a specific time of day. Getting active, get all that vitamin D. We've been pretty lucky that the weather has been decent during this time. Get outside as much as you possibly can. Also, I don't know about you guys, but my phone has this neat thing under the settings called the digital well-being, and I can put limits on how long I spend on certain apps. So I put for myself a limit on Facebook so that I can't spend more than 5 or 10 minutes on there a day. So that way I can still feel like I'm staying up to date on those things, but I can't let it take over my life. And it sounds basic, but get dressed. Make sure you're getting dressed as if you were leaving the house each day, because that action is going to make you feel better, and same with your kids. So like I was talking about, it's that thought, feeling, behavior relationship. And then check for yourself, is this thought that I'm having, is it realistic, is it helpful? And also, is there a behavior that would help make me or my family feel happier? I think the other thing that's really important to consider too is that we're gonna feel some negative emotions about this, and that's okay. We don't need to change that. So for your kids too, just reflect that emotion, identify it, and validate it for them. So you must be feeling sad that you can't go play with your neighbor. You must be feeling sad that we're not going to do the end of the year field trip. and then validate it. You're right. It is sad, and it is unfair. And so I think it's okay to sit with that emotion and not feel the need to be a problem solver or to change it, but just to recognize, yeah, it does feel bad, and this is sad, and it is unfair. And that feeling of validation, I think, is really important. The other thing, too, is for your, we know that a lot of kids with autism already have a hard time with identifying emotions. So helping them, maybe building it into the routine even. So kind of checking in throughout the day of how you're feeling. I like this emotion chart because it can help make that really concrete and visual. A lot of people might be familiar with 5-point scales. I have an example there, but also this website has an example. And this is a way to help kids not just recognize what is their emotion, but also recognize the intensity of it. And then it's also, as a parent, you can model that emotion identification too. So if you're talking about how frustrating it is that you can't go see someone, say, I'm feeling sad because I can't go visit my sister. And by you modeling that, that's going to help our kids do a better job with identifying their emotions too. Sean?
Mm-hmm. And so the other thing to look at is recognizing that behavior is communication. And so we're going to see some different behaviors from kids, and they may not be what they appear to be. So when our child says, I'm bored, it could mean they're depressed because they're not seeing their friends. It could mean they're frustrated because they can't go do their preferred activities in the community, or they've been missing some of their preferred activities at school. When they say, I'm hungry, it could mean I'm bored, I don't know what else to do, and so I like to eat, so I'm going to eat. And if they're being clingy or wanting a lot of extra attention, that really could be anxiety coming out in terms of not knowing what to expect and having some routines not be the same as kids are used to. So it's really important to recognize that some of the behavior we might be seeing is going to come out in some different ways that's not obvious, because our kids with autism most of the time don't say, I'm really frustrated because I miss seeing these 2 friends at school, so I think I'm feeling depressed and I think I need to have an alternative activity. And so it's important to kind of figure out what some of those could be.
So I'm going to talk through pretty quickly, because we only have a minute or 2 left, about some specific coping strategies, but everyone will have a copy of these slides. And if there's something you want me to talk about more in detail, I'm happy to do that during the question and answer time. So we all know that routines are important, and we all know it's really hard to maintain right now. Limiting news exposure is really important. I know for myself, I'm making a point of turning off all electronics at least 45 minutes before bed so I can relax enough so that I can go to sleep, because that's going to help my coping. One thing I want to touch on is the idea of a worry time or worry box. So this is the idea that for kids or adults who are worrying constantly, set aside a time a day that you are going to devote to worrying. So if you are having thoughts or worries cropping up at other times of the day, you can remind yourself or remind your child, like, hey, write it down. We're going to talk about that at worry time. And then once it gets to be worry time of day, definitely don't do it right around bedtime. Pull all those worries out of your worry box, and then spend good 10 minutes talking and really focusing on those worries. And the idea is this is a way to kind of expose yourself to those worries and be able to sit with it and really focus on it, and also prevent yourself from having those worries popping up at times that you want to be doing something else, like doing your schoolwork or your work from home job. And you can kind of help organize that better for your own brain so that you don't find that those worries are popping up and becoming intrusive. For kids, sometimes just a concrete action of writing down the worries and putting in a box is a way to help them kind of organize that and compartmentalize in a way that can be really helpful and beneficial for them. Of course, we always talk about deep breathing all the time. So this is a great example of how to do that. I included on here my favorite video about belly breathing. Common and Colby Calais have this wonderful video with Elmo that really walks through how to do deep belly breathing. So if you have a kid who's that's the right developmental age for them to look at that video, watch it together, and practice some of that deep belly breathing to help relax and calm down. The other one that I want to talk about is the idea of meditation and mindfulness. I really like to do a mindful moment when I'm doing therapy with kids. And the idea is that mindfulness is about kind of being present and focusing on yourself in this present space. And it can really help people with relaxation. It's great for caregivers too. And it's not about changing your thoughts or changing things necessarily, but it's about recognizing where you are. So if I was to coach someone through a mindful moment, I would have you close your eyes, focus on your deep, slow breath in and your slow breath out, and focus on that breathing for 5 to 10 breaths. And then start to focus on a particular sense or sensation. And I like to do listening because I think that's a fun one. And what you do is you try to really notice and identify all the sounds in your environment. And you'll start with the really obvious ones, like, you know, the sound of someone walking around in your house, or the sound of a dog barking or a kid talking. And then you'll start to notice the next quieter one. You'll start to notice the person mowing the lawn outside. And then you'll start to notice the sound of the wind on the side of your house. You'll notice the quiet hum of the refrigerator. And then you'll notice, eventually you'll get down to even noticing little sounds like your hair moving against your ear. And being able to focus on the present moment like that can be really helpful for people to help recenter them and release some of that anxiety. I think the other thing that's important to think about too is for younger kids, it can be really helpful to give them a sense of control. We all have a need for control, and there's so much that's out of control right now with COVID. So ways you can build in control is by letting them, you know, take the lead in playing with you, building in choices throughout the day. Do you want to wear this shirt or that shirt? Do you want to have hot dogs for lunch or hamburgers? Do you want to go for a walk around the park, or do you want to ride your bike around the street? Whatever choice you can build in, bore them with choices. But you can also let kids take a caretaker or a baby role, and that can give them a sense of control too that's good during pretend play. I think another thing that's great too is giving a child something else to take care of, and it makes them feel big and powerful and in control. So these are pictures of my niece, who has lately been really into taking care of her stuffed animals, and this has really started happening since COVID. And so she gently puts them down to sleep each night and tells them not to worry and tells them that they're safe and okay. And that's a way for her to kind of take on that big kid role and have some ownership and control over the situation. And then the last thing I want to touch on before we go to questions is this idea of gratitude and benefit finding. So as humans, we have this incredible capacity that even when we're in a stormy time, even when things are really bad, we're able to find the benefits. So you talk to people who've suffered through trauma or had cancer and been through really, really challenging things, and people sometimes have this incredible capacity to say, even though this horrible thing happened, as a result, I grew closer to my family. I had more time to slow down. And it's okay to feel the same way about COVID. So it can be hard for our kids with autism to recognize they can feel two ways about a situation. It's both really bad that people are sick, it's terrible that I can't go to school, but it's also okay to feel happy that you don't have to take a test right now. And it's okay to feel happy that you get to play with your pets more. And so recognizing that ambiguity and that kind of duality of feeling two ways about a situation can be helpful for coping. And you can even set aside a time each week where your family talks about what have been the high things about this week and what have been the low things, what has been good and what has been bad. And then additional resources. Dr. Mosconi already touched on this, but on the Telehealth Rocks website, KCART, and also our Kansas Blend YouTube and Facebook page, we have some additional videos talking about coping skills, mindfulness during the COVID time. So happy to switch gears and take some questions now.
All right, thank you, Sean and Dr. Swales. That was great. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback so far. One question that we got was, for example, how many hours of schoolwork should I be trying to do with my child per day? Can you, either of you speak to that?
Well, there's a general rule we talk about when we have our kids with autism and they start entering the homework era, even in normal times, where you don't want to get to a point where doing homework is denigrating the quality of life for the child. And it's important, you know, in a normal time to communicate with the school that we're going to limit the amount of homework to a certain amount per night. And kids with autism and other learning disabilities, sometimes the amount of homework they should be doing every night isn't the same. A 2-hour block of homework for a high school kid with autism could be take that high school kid 6 hours to do. So it's really important to limit the amount of work you're doing based on how your child's responding to it and what level of frustration you see. Because in this very unprecedented time, giving that child some control of deciding I've had enough or I'm going to set a goal and persevere through a certain point can be really helpful. You don't want to set up a situation where a negative behavior is going to drive getting out of doing work. So you can pre-teach some things and set up a situation where that child is deciding this is the goal I'm going to reach, this is how much I want to do. And if they don't want to do more than that or can't do more than that, it's okay. And sometimes we have our kids with autism that are real perfectionists, and they will spend more time than they need to get something done. So it's important to know that about them and know that we're going to actually put a limit on what they're doing as well. Again, so that that overall quality of life is positive and not negatively impacted by that requirement.
And I'll just add in quickly before we switch to Dr. Bellinger, I think it's important to reach out to your teachers too for guidance. They're happy and willing to answer some of those questions. I also think it's important to think first about quality of life, just like Sean was talking about, rather than quantity of academic work. And I also think if you have a child who really pushes you with work refusal, especially if that's been a chronic issue, then it might be more important that we get just a little something done to end on compliance, to end with success, rather than focusing on I really have to get these 10 worksheets done or whatever it is.
And also, I'll just note, you know, this is an unprecedented situation for schools and for special education teams. And so a lot of the folks I know in schools want feedback from parents and want you to communicate with them that, gosh, my kid really could use more work in this area, or what you sent home is really just too complicated. Is there something else you could send? And they're very happy to work with you to make this work for everybody.
Great. Okay, thank you, Dr. Swales and Sean, for a great presentation. Dr. Bellinger is going to talk next about some practical strategies and visual supports.
All right, thank you. I'm just going to keep it real with you guys. I am working from home and I have 2 little boys. And so if any of them run in the screen or if you hear them, that's what's going on. So I just wanted to put that out there and again, say that we're all in this together and we're all just doing the best that we can. So we have some, I may speak a little bit to that last question too about kind of how much to put in. Like they mentioned, it's just so important to set everyone up for success. And so we'll talk about how to do that with kind of really small goals that we can all feel successful about. So specifically, we're going to talk about visual supports today. Visual supports is one of my favorite topics because I think it can make a world of difference for children with autism and for children without autism and everyone, really, for all of us. We all do better if we have a visual support, a checklist, a to-do list, and especially in this unprecedented time that we really need some of those supports. So the great thing about visuals is that they improve understanding and cooperation. They provide structure and predictability. They clarify routines that might be clear, but may not be as clear to some kiddos. They help with transitions or changes and prepare us for those things. They can teach new skills. They make abstract concepts more concrete, especially like time. I know a lot of our kiddos, young kids, kids with developmental disabilities, time is really abstract. So you saying we're going to do that later is really, really frustrating for kids. And a lot of that happens when we're all working from home and trying to get things done. Oh, we'll do that later. But that's pretty stressful. So how are we going to make that clear to them? What does later mean? When is that going to happen? Is it really going to happen? It can build in reinforcement and rewards and hold everybody accountable for that, which I think is nice because sometimes I'll say, oh, if we do this, then we get to do this. Well, then I forget. Or, we don't remember what we were going to do. And so if it's on a visual, it keeps everybody honest. You can use pictures, symbols, text, or a combination, and that depends on your kiddo and what they respond best to. I found this really great visual that explains all the amazing things about visuals. And so, again, they're permanent. They allow time for language processing. They help kids see what you mean. So you're not just trying to explain something to them, they can actually see it. Visuals help all students, they help all kids. So if they help your kiddo with autism, they're gonna help the siblings that don't have autism. They're really helpful for everyone to stay focused and on task on what they need to be doing. They help build independence. Kids feel like, yay, I can do this myself. They don't need to ask you for every step, which I think is really exciting that they feel good about themselves. Visuals are transferable between environments and people. In this situation, it's great. So if something works at school, use that same visual at home. Visuals have no attitude. So they can see what they need to do without you getting frustrated, where they can see that you're tired or you're frustrated, and they just know, okay, this is what I need to do next. So that really reduces that power struggle that can often happen when kids and parents start getting frustrated about things. And visuals help reduce anxiety. So again, if I don't know what's going to happen, and especially I don't know what's happening in the world, and I don't know personally when I'm going to get to go see my friends again, or when I'm going to get to go see my colleagues again, or when my kids get to go back to school. So if we can make some things visual, that can reduce anxiety about some things, right? That I know what's going to happen today. I know what's going to happen in the next hour or so. And so our kids with autism, that can be really beneficial, that they can feel less anxious because they know what's going to happen in the immediate future. So again, picking those appropriate activities, you know, making things small. We want it to be an easy success. So pick something short. Make things shorter than you would typically make it, just so that everybody can feel successful. Provide transition warnings and use timers. We're going to talk about visual schedules today, social stories, first then charts, and red light, green light, and then the use of praise and reinforcement. So using all these things can really help set your whole family up for success during this time. Okay, so the first thing we're going to talk about is visual schedules. So you can use these for any routine. You can use it, you can make a visual for all day long if you want, or just a certain challenging time. And so we talked a lot about, as a group, you know, we don't want you to leave this feeling overwhelmed, like I have to make all these visuals, but think about, is there one time that's been really hard for your family? And maybe you can make a visual just for that time, just to make that time go a little bit better. So you can use it however it fits for your family. Don't feel like you have to have one for everything. You know, simple is better. It doesn't need to be a big fancy Pinterest, you know, giant chart. Just do whatever you can. Alternate preferred and non-preferred activities. So always make sure you're thinking about what's something that, you know, we don't love to do, that's sort of a chore, like brush my teeth, and then I get to do something that I do like to do, like eat breakfast, and then I have to do my schoolwork, and then I get to watch YouTube. So thinking about how do we build those preferred and non-preferred activities just into the daily schedule to give us all little breaks that we need. Making those fun rewards and those preferred activities visible so they can see it. Oh my gosh, look, if I get through this, I get to have snacks and cookies. And then I get to play outside and have lunch, so they can see what's happening and all these good things that are going to happen when they get through their routine. Really try to include your kids in the process. So let them pick the pictures if you are, you know, doing it from Microsoft Word or, you know, Googling images or even drawing things. They can be part of it, and then they'll feel much more excited to use it. They can even choose when they want things on their schedules. When we're making those schedules, I really want everybody to be thinking about, Dr. Swales did a great job talking about this, but how, you know, maybe making a schedule for everyone's healthy routine. These are things that are healthy for your whole family to include in maybe a visual schedule, which would be healthy sleep, exercises that you guys can do together, yoga, dance parties, walks, including nutrition, time for play and fun, work and learning, you know, including chores and helper jobs on those things. And also building in time for relaxation and screens. And again, it's okay. If you've done some of those things, you can have screens for the rest of the day, right? As long as you've kind of incorporated some of those healthy routines. So don't feel bad about that at all. The next thing I'm going to talk about is a first then sort of chart. And so this is pretty basic. Many of you have probably seen it, but it works really well for our kiddos that have a hard time thinking about those long-term consequences, or maybe a whole schedule is too much. But this is really clear for first I work and I can see that, and then I get to play and I can see that. And we always use grandma's principle, or the pre-Mac principle, which is you have to eat your vegetables before you get your dessert. So think about something that maybe they don't love to do or isn't their favorite thing, and always pair that with something after that is something they really love to do. So they can see, hey, if I do this, then I get this. Social stories can be really beneficial, especially during times like this. Really, you know, just little individualized short stories that make these challenging situations more manageable. So they can be anywhere from very, very basic, depending on your child's developmental level, to even more complicated. I've seen some really complicated ones about COVID, about, you know, what the virus is and how it spreads. And I think that's really great for some kids to help them understand. But some kids just need a very basic story like this one that's, you know, I love to go to school. I like to learn and see my friends and teachers, but right now we can't go to school. We have to stay home because of the coronavirus. And, but we can still, you know, we can still have school at home. We can see our teachers and friends on the screens. We can play outside. And when we do all those things, we stay safe and healthy. I had a little guy, patient that was real sad about not going to school. And so we were trying to think of ways, how do we make him understand this so that he's just not so sad about it all the time? And so if you just read these things over and over, and hopefully that repetition will help them understand kind of what's going on and what are some of the alternatives. So when I make a social story, always thinking about setting the stage, introducing what's going on, what's the situation, making it personal, labeling and validating emotions if possible. So like Dr. Swales was talking about, you can put in the story, I feel sad that I can't go to school. It's okay that I feel sad. You know, it's okay to feel sad. We just have to We just have to, use some of these coping skills, and we can feel sad, but there's lots of things we can do instead as well. So you want to teach the lesson and the skill, and then include positive coping skills and explain the importance of why that's important. So we need to do this so that we all can stay healthy. Here's some more examples of some good coping or some good social stories for COVID. The last thing I want to just touch on is a red light, green light visual. And this is really easy. So just using like a piece of construction paper with a red piece and a green piece on one side, where it can be a visual cue of when your kiddo can have access to their favorite things like tablets, snacks, even time to play with you. So putting a red light on your office door if they can't come in and play, and a green sign if they can come in and play. Same with a green, red light, green light on the refrigerator. If it's not time for a snack, it's red. If it is time for a snack, it's green. And the tablet, that can be really used nicely with that too. And if kiddos aren't respecting that, you can even put a little consequence in. Like, if you ask me for your tablet when it's red, you lose 5 minutes on your tablet when it's tablet time. So thinking about how do you really help them understand this really is meaningful. This red light, green light does mean something. You just giving lots of praise. We all need lots of praise right now, lots of positive reinforcement. So thinking about ways to provide that, always giving them lots of praise for doing the things on their schedule, and everybody just for kind of getting through the day. We all kind of need our own little sticker charts, I feel like, right now. So think about creative ways that you can use that. Here's some good resources of ways that you can make your own visuals. If you guys haven't seen the app ChoiceWorks, I do want to hit on that. ChoiceWorks is amazing. I believe it's less than $5, and you can make your own visuals. They have pictures you can use. You can take pictures of your kids. You can make videos of your kids doing things on their schedule. And then once they do it, they get to pull it over and it says all done. And so they can sort of see all the things that they've done. It's really awesome. Check it out. I also use, again, Microsoft Word a lot. I just search for online pictures and plug it in there. Teachers Pay Teachers has good stuff. Don't be afraid to Google. There's good social stories everywhere. So if you just need one, just Google it and you can find probably a good one. Here's some good resources. Again, Dr. Swales mentioned some of those, but there's lots of great stuff out there right now. So hopefully you guys will get these slides and you can have those websites as well. So I went a little bit over. So is there any questions, Dr.
Yeah, Dr. Bellinger, can you talk a little bit about, so first of all, this was fantastic. And I think that some of these links are going to be really helpful. I wanted to say really quickly, I'm getting a lot of people asking me if we will record this. Yes, we will. And you should get an email when it's been posted if you were registered for the conference. So one question we've gotten is, can you talk a little bit about how to modify these for different developmental stages?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So some of the stuff I showed today was probably for kind of lower developmental levels or pretty basic, but there's some really cool stuff out there. I mean, a social story can work for any, from really young kids to even, adults with different autism or even not autism, anxiety, just kind of thinking through where is your kid at and what are they going to understand. So with the older kids, maybe more words, maybe more details. Maybe they get to research a little bit about what's in it and why it's important. They can be part of creating it. And with those younger kids or those kids that are less verbal, really thinking about just pictures maybe, and just making it really, really basic. Because if you give them too much, then it's not going to sink in the way that maybe would be the most helpful.
Okay, that's great. Let's see. We did get one question about your thoughts about scheduling specific things. So for example, scheduling in time with specific family members or being able to see specific friends over the screen. Your thoughts about maybe doing general things versus more specific schedules.
I think it probably depends on your family and what works best for you. I worry a little bit about putting way too many things because if you don't get to them, is that going to set them up for being disappointed? But, maybe even having, general times like social time, and you get to pick from a list of family members that you can FaceTime or that you can call. So in case somebody doesn't answer, maybe the next person will. So I think it's good to have, general times but then have some maybe more specific choices in there so that they can pick from a list.
Great. That's a great idea. Okay, well, if we don't have any more questions about practical supports, let's see. Oh, actually, this is a really good question that I think you can address, or maybe we can talk more about at the end. So some suggestions for how to communicate to your child that seeing somebody over a computer screen is that you can see somebody over a computer screen, but you can't go see them in person?
Wow, that is a good question. I don't know, maybe there's a whole social story to be made about that. I think that some of this resources that have already been created about the virus and how it spreads, maybe would help some kids understand that a little bit better, that it spreads by people, you know, touching each other or breathing on each other, and the computer sort of helps us to kind of keep those germs away from each other or something. But that's a good thing. If anyone has any ideas about that, you could chat it to the whole group, because that could be a little bit confusing.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Bellinger. That was really helpful. And again, you will be able to access those links that were at the end of her slides when we get all these materials posted to the KCART website. Okay, Dr. Jameson, we are ready for you to talk about being social.
All right. Well, I'm just getting so many ideas for myself. I was getting a little anxious thinking about all the things that I need to do, but trying to remember Dr. Swill's telling me that it's okay to be good enough. So I'm going to tell the kids that when they come back, that I'm good enough. So I am going to talk about staying or getting connected at a distance. And I know that we said, and I know that you said we're going to talk about being social, but I want to think about being connected a little bit more broadly too, and thinking about the individual perspective and what it means to feel connected. And one of those ways is to be connected with people and relationships, whether it's family or coworkers or friends or teachers or classmates or people you see at the same establishments that you frequent. But another piece I think that really helps people feel connected is being able to do the things that they want to do, being able to, you know, go the places they want to go and have spend time doing their interests. And so I think that's something that, as we think about being connected, that I really want to talk more about today, is how we can build in those preferred activities and interest into you and your child or your family or your an individual's life, because I think that helps people stay connected. I think another thing to think about is the actual space that you're in, whether it's in your home or at your work or at the school, where you're feeling connected just from being there. And I think part of that is that familiarity, the safety, security. And certainly communication is part of feeling connected. For some people that may be, you know, talking to someone, seeing someone. For others, it just may be physical touch or being present or near someone or conveying emotions. So I want to think about being connected in a broader sense than just, you know, social get-togethers or talking to people. So I borrowed this from the intervention program that I do when we think about making plans, because it's pretty broad, abstract concept when you think about, well, making plans with someone, and, you know, you have to think about where do you go, what do you want to do, who do you see, what are the activities and interests that you have, and how could those all relate to figuring out what to do. So thinking about our current state now, really focusing on, well, what is someone's interest? What are the activities that you enjoy? Not just going out and about of what you used to do, if some of those are there, but what do you like to do at home? Do you like to read? Do you do puzzles? Are you building Legos? Are you into Star Wars or Pokemon or art? And then what's on your schedule now? I've heard a lot of differences between school districts and in terms of expectations. So it's thinking about, is it self-guided if you're learning at home? Are you interacting with the teacher or other students? And thinking about, well, how is that the same or different from before? And what did that mean to you? Was there value in connecting to your teacher, even if you don't have to, for example, just to see that person's face, or so you can see some of your classmates? What does staying at home mean for you that could result in doing something better or more often? I thought that Dr. Swells did a nice job framing to adults as well as kids that it's okay to feel two ways about a situation. And I talked to lots of families about some benefits. Some people are just talking about like eating a meal together. Other people have mentioned, I put the picture of the communication system here because they're really getting to use the materials that the child was using at school, in the home, and getting guidance from the therapist. And it's been very valuable and has resulted in much more connections and communication. So I think it's trying to think about, okay, well, what are the benefits, or what are the things that we could do to get connected because there is more time together. The other thing is to think about what did we do in the past, and then what is upcoming that we're missing, and what are the priorities. And I think that that's the theme through all the different talks, is whether it's structuring your day, or whether it's thinking about what is good enough to accomplish and the expectations, but same thing with being connected. Because I've also heard a lot of families talk about, you know, doing virtual therapy and virtual ABA and virtual school and, you know, virtual social connections. And so that's a lot. And so thinking about what interactions is my child or myself already getting, and then what are the priorities and how I can do that. So I was talking about, I think one of the priorities is to think about how you can provide that familiarity during this unfamiliar time, and how you can cultivate people's interest and really integrate that into the day-to-day activities. That is going to help you or help your child feel connected. So try and, Dr. Bellinger mentioned on the visual supports to include preferred and non-preferred activities. I agree that try and build in opportunities into the learning that is around someone's interest. I think a lot of people can take some leniency, right? If you're the teacher, I mean, you're one of the teachers now, and so really think about how you can structure it so that your child is successful, or so that your family time is more positive. And think about enhancing a skill. So I work with several adolescent girls, and one was telling me about the time that she is able to spend on her art now, and that it's a great expression of her emotion and anxiety, but it's also a skill development time for her. I had another young woman talk about baking, and that being one of her areas of interest, and how she's really improved on that and had much more time to do that. Simulate missed or unavailable activities. I had families talk about a scouting trip that was going to be the first camping trip, and so camping out in the backyard, thinking about Lego Masters. I don't know if anyone has been watching Lego Masters, or if you have people in your family that like to build with Legos, but I know that's been something that our family's been watching together, and I've heard of people creating a little mini Lego Masters concept. So you give people challenges for what to build, certainly not like this, but on a smaller scale, and doing that activity with family. And then just building in, again, any of those opportunities for preferred interest and shared interest. I like what I think it was either Dr. Bellinger or Dr. Swills talked about, giving people a sense of when is that going to happen, not just say later, or not just say maybe, or not don't ask me right now. And I think that if we think about the feeling connected with your interest and kids wanting to be able to do the things they want to do, that's really important then to validate when that's going to be, and to build that in as much as possible. So thinking about who do you see, who do you talk to, who did you talk to outside of class, who do you have things in common with, and kids who oftentimes I hear people say that they do most of their interacting with people at school. They don't see a lot of them outside of school. And so being thoughtful about the missed social opportunities there, who might be someone who could reach out to an individual so that they could initiate an interaction with them. I think that enlisting meaningful people in your child's life or your own life, that can be really valuable. Make sure my time here. Get connected together. So thinking about connecting within your family and then connecting as a family. You've seen, I build it, it kind of goes along the lines too of setting up things for success. Build in small chunks of time for one-on-one interactions across the day, and attention and time during those preferred activities, because that's going to do a lot of the prevention of those challenging behaviors, and it's going to build connections. Partner up for daily routines, even if your child isn't able to participate, fully in making dinner, but to partner, two individuals from the family together on, Monday and Wednesday, and then a different set of individuals on Tuesday and Thursday. that provides supervision to on one hand, but then also gives a sense of what to expect and that interaction and kind of a routine to the flow, because I believe many more families are eating at home now. Connect together. So connect with, if you're connecting as a family to another family, perhaps, if that could be one way to reach out for a child who didn't have a lot of outside of school interactions or social interactions. And so you could build in a visit, a FaceTime, a Zoom or whatever, or a game with the family and the child. And so then again, promoting that interaction. Other thing to think about is building games that promote interaction within your family. I put the My Family Scavenger Hunt here. Again, creating opportunities that they would have to interact with someone within their family or contact someone outside of their family. I know that there's probably a large chunk of individuals and kids who already do a lot of online gaming, and then there's probably a chunk of people who have been really hesitant to participate in that. And I know I'm on the hesitant side. However, you know, connect safe and smart. And so thinking about how, if I put Minecraft up here, my son and his friend have been chatting over Minecraft and giving them that little connection and doing an activity that they both enjoy. House Party is another app where you can play games on there, but it is social media. So you have to think about, you know, who your child would be able to connect with, but you can, the games are built in there. And I think that could be another way that you could do those things together. And so you're connecting with other people outside, but then also just within your own family. So thinking about connecting, but not in a virtual sense, doing something simultaneous or knowing that someone else is doing it at the same time. So at 3 o'clock, we're going to, you know, go on a walk, having people, whether it's in someone's class or a friend network or a neighborhood, and you're not going with that person, but it's just you're doing that shared activity at the same time. Spork It for Kids is a great, like 5 to 10 minute videos that you can do some, follow the guidance of another child and at various age ranges, and you're not interacting, but it kind of feels like someone's leading you along. Another thing I've seen people do, just kind of hanging out on FaceTime or Zoom and doing simultaneous interactions. And so they're just, somebody's drawing, and so they can share a drawing, or somebody else is, you know, crafting something or playing Pokemon or whatever it is, but doing just kind of hanging out virtually. Host a brief meetup online and thinking about like setting things up for success. So many of you know I do an intervention program called Girls Night Out, or GNO. And so one of the things that we really focus on is creating opportunities for successful practice. And so if you are with your child, one thing you can do is we use a private, just like you guys can private message typically on Zoom, we can private message to the girls in our group and give them positive feedback, but we can also private message and say, ask a question, or, you know, make a comment on something. And the other day we private messaged and did charades. And so people would send each other ones to do, and they were doing that. And so you can host that and help facilitate that kind of in this virtual realm. And then lastly, I think similar to that, we're behind the scenes, you know, typing in the messages. I think enlisting peers, family, friends, whoever, teachers to initiate and help encourage any of those connections. Because I know a lot of the families that I work with talk about, you know, so it's being really hard to get someone to initiate, whether it's contacting someone or, you know, participating in some kind of online activity or game. And so enlisting other people to contact your child, ask them about their interest, do a hangout or a game, and then even giving them some tips about the things, the interest, and how they can promote interaction together. And prioritize, I think, is the last kind of note, that to think about all the responsibilities and all the changes and all of kind of the weight of all the things we have to do. I think connecting doesn't have to be, you know, the social connect, or, you know, kind of the friends or social connection. I think it should be an element and really prioritizing what do I or my child need, what was there before and is missing, and how can I connect in various new ways.
Thanks, Renee. That was really great. I like how you provided some alternative opportunities to just, I don't know about anybody else, but I'm a little bit sick of staring at a computer screen to interact with other people. And so giving some other options. And then also how you talked about, I can imagine some parents might be hesitant to know how to monitor safety when you're communicating with people online. So I think that you gave some really nice alternatives there as well. Some questions that we're getting, so not as much related to peer social interactions, but in maintaining typical aspects of routines, can you talk a little bit about whether there are opportunities for telehealth services or continuing therapy for individuals with autism? And this, I guess, this can go to anybody.
And do you mean, like, was it regarding like social connections or more just like therapy? Because I know we've heard of both. I mean, we're certainly doing, you know, individual support, behavior support, or cognitive behavioral therapy, those kinds of things over telehealth. We were in the middle of our Girls Night Out social group when all this happened. So we're continuing virtually, and we'll be offering some kind of more community social opportunities for adolescents and young adults in the future. And I know there's been some quite a few places that are now doing behavioral support or ABA therapy, speech and language pathology.
Okay, great. Yeah, Dr. Swales and Dr. Bellinger, I think that you guys had discussed that you were continuing providing services online. Can you talk a little bit more about what that looks like? And for families who may not know that that's an option for them.
Absolutely. So at KU Medical Center in the Department of Pediatrics, we're continuing to offer all of our therapeutic services just over telehealth now. So if you were interested in scheduling that, the phone number is 913-588-6300. And you'd be asking for either behavioral pediatrics, so that'd be for a child or adolescent who doesn't have a diagnosis of developmental delay or autism spectrum disorder, or you'd be asking for the behavior support clinic. Behavior support clinic would be for someone who does have an existing diagnosis of autism or related developmental disorder. And so we're doing that just like this session. We're using Zoom for those appointments. I sit here and do my therapy here all day. And we have families call in on their cell phone, tablet, or computer, and they're able to access a link to a Zoom meeting, and then we carry on as usual. It's provided some interesting opportunities to really get a better sense of what's happening in someone's home. So I'm finding the benefits there. It's been fun to kind of be able to see more about what that looks like and help really generalize skills we've been talking about in the therapy setting into an in-home setting.
Great. So we've gotten some, oh, sorry, go for it.
I was just going to add real quick that that I have also noticed with really a lot of commonalities, and a lot of the girls that I work with, peers and participants, I've always noticed that, but then they're talking about the same sorts of things and providing some really good coping ideas for how they're getting through this and how they're really finding the positive. I've been really impressed by these adolescents and inspired to try and do that better on my own.
All right, really quickly. Dr. Swales, can you share your screen and put the phone number up on that screen? We're getting a few requests for that. And then, okay, so we have sort of transitioned, I guess unofficially, now officially, into the more general Q&A session. So we have a few backlogged questions that I'm gonna ask, but then you can go ahead and keep the questions coming for any of the speakers about specific topics or more general topics that you would like us to cover. So we've gotten a few questions about dealing with kids who are having really strong emotions right now. And so some questions about kids who are experiencing really severe anxiety and how to talk to children about when this will end and to get, I guess, how to give specific language to something that we don't really have a lot of specific answers for. Can any of you speak a little bit about that?
I think Dr. Swales is still trying to get that phone number up,
sorry.
so I'll try to speak to that. I mean, I think it's, again, going back to that, validating the emotion that it's really okay to feel this way. And like, we're all, you know, many of us are feeling this way. So being able to kind of validate that. The other thing I've been trying to give families sort of general kind of 3-step guidelines for helping manage anxiety with this. And, talking about, first of all, that the good news is that we know from that for right now is that kids are really pretty safe. And so, kids are, when they're getting it, they're not getting very sick. They don't have to worry about that. That their families are going to keep them safe, and that you as a family unit are doing everything that you can to keep them safe, and you're doing all the right things. And so they should feel really, really good about that. And then, but the reason that we're doing all of this and staying in our homes is really to be like community helpers and germ busters. So, it's not that we're scared to leave our house or that we're afraid that we're going to get sick, or we're not really, that's not really our worry. It's more that we don't want to spread germs for other people that might get sick. And so we want to take care of everyone, which also gives kids some control too, right? That I'm helping take care of my neighbors and my friends and my family by doing this. So I think those are good things to kind of frame. I also think, if it really is severe, it may need some additional supports or therapies. And so reaching out for, I've had some parents contact about, possibly thinking about medication now that they weren't before. And so reaching out to your pediatrician, reaching out to, again, like area providers that are providing telehealth services, and trying to get in for some of that cognitive behavioral therapy that Dr. Swales mentioned. There's some great apps, Mind Shift, Calm, Super Better. We can send some of those out too, but some great apps that do some kind of anxiety management within an app virtually, so you don't have to wait for an appointment. So it might be good to do some of those apps right now too.
That's great.
Kind of, I was just going to say, add on about the, you don't know when it's going to end, right? We don't know. And so thinking about providing some short-term kind of structure. So I've been thinking about calendar. So this is today, yesterday we did this, and tomorrow we're going to, here's the plans for tomorrow. So even though we don't know when you're going to go back to school, or if you're going to go back to school, or your sports or your daycare or whatever, we know what is going to happen tomorrow. So I think that those small chunks could provide some structure.
Good. So I know that I think you just mentioned some really great tools. We've gotten a question about if there are any alternatives to the breathing tools that you shared for when your kids are experiencing some really extreme anxiety or having a meltdown, if you can talk about some other specific strategies besides breathing tools.
That's a great question. So first of all, I think it's always important when you're talking about a specific coping skill like breathing, that it's not, when someone's escalated, not the time to teach a new skill. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm completely emotionally flooded, if you try to get me to try something completely new, my brain can barely even manage what's currently going on, much less try to adapt and try something new. A lot of times when I'm explaining it to families, I talk about the first time you learn how to ride a bike, you don't want to do it on a big hill. You would want to do it in a really flat parking lot on a really easy and calm day, right? And it's the same thing when we're learning a new coping skill. I like breathing. I know not every kid likes it, and that's okay. The reason I like breathing is because it doesn't require any materials, and you always have your breath with you, right? So if you were to teach a skill like breathing, I'd probably say let's teach it at a time that they're feeling calm and in a good mood. Let's pick a way that feels interesting and appealing to them. So that's why I kind of like that Alma video, because if you watch it, it's also pretty funny. But for another kid, maybe it's calling it Darth Vader breathing. I had a kid who really used to do that. I won't do it over my microphone, but you can imagine what I'm talking about, right? And it sounds like big, deep, calm, slow breaths. So you do it at a time that they're calm, and then you build in some regular practice. Just like with riding our bike, you don't go from riding in the flat parking lot to the next day riding on a hill. It takes gradual practice, and it's the same way with a coping skill like breathing. So maybe every day we're going to breathe in a little bit of breathing time. So now when we're actually in that tantrum and we're having that big meltdown, now it's a skill that we're trying to apply to a situation, and might be more likely to be able to use it. I think the other thing, too, is to think about how can we really sweeten the deal and make this something that kids are motivated to do, like taking deep breaths when they're upset. And so for some kids, what you might do is pair it with an existing reward system. So if they were working for their dessert that night or something like that, maybe they get a little bit of some reward for practicing taking their breaths each day. And then if they either don't have a meltdown, or if when they have a meltdown and you ask them to take a breath, they do it, those would be things that could earn them the reward. So that way we're kind of incentivizing them to do that. But there's lots of other things besides taking deep breaths that can work really well too to help yourself calm down. Dr. Bellinger, you're looking like you wanted to add something there.
One of my favorites is like progressive muscle relaxation. So like I do like robot ragdoll. So you get really tense like a robot and like everything's all metal and as tense as your muscles can get. And then like let it go like a rag doll. And that always makes me personally feel better. So I feel like it, and I know a lot of kids that that's helpful for, but it's exactly what Dr. Swale said. Again, it's in the moment, it's not going to help to be like robot rag doll, tense up. I mean, in the moment you can't teach that skill. And so those things have to be taught beforehand, and then you can incorporate them. Another idea would be to have sort of just like a space that they can go where they've sort of created things that calm them down, like sort of the bottles that, I don't think that's an intervention in itself, but like if there's something they like to look at, or stress balls or bean bags or places they feel safe that they can, or like a little tent, they can go retreat and calm themselves down. I also think at some points when kids are so far gone, sometimes there's nothing you can do really except sort of just kind of let them kind of calm down. And I think that's okay. And you don't have to feel like you have to swoop in and save them every time. Because sometimes when we try to swoop in and save, it actually escalates. Because, just like Dr. Swale was saying, when I'm upset and if somebody's like, calm down, like that doesn't, it doesn't really help me at that moment. And so sometimes kids just have to sort of work through that on their own when they're at that point.
And I think that's the other piece too, is that we would all of us focus on the prevention piece as much as possible and reinforcing the skills or behaviors we want to see most of the time. And so at the, kind of the principles of lessening expectations, not that if you tell someone to do it over and over again, say, okay, never mind, but don't give as many commands. And if you see someone getting irritable, try and, back off on having them do things or pushing for the work. So those pieces I think are really, really important because it's easier to manage behaviors when we don't have as many going on.
Yeah.
And I was also going to say that it's really important to, as a parent, give yourself grace and give yourself permission to know that tomorrow is going to be a better day. Mm-hmm. When our kids are experiencing strong emotions, they can actually be, especially our older kids, they can be scary and they can be sometimes really extreme reactions to things we're all feeling. And this is unprecedented. And so it's okay to give yourself grace if your child has a giant meltdown and it's really hard to watch. You didn't fail as a parent. This is an unprecedented situation. And whether they go to school or whether they can go to Walmart are all out of your control. And so give yourself grace and don't let yourself go to the place of feeling anxious yourself because my child's having a behavior, because that can help drive that behavior more. Give yourself grace, allow yourself the understanding that you've done the best you can, going back to I've been good enough and we're gonna have a better day tomorrow.
I think that's a great point, and that you can't feel guilty about your response. Like sometimes you are going to lose your temper, right? I know from personal experience, sometimes you are just really going to need to walk away, and like all those things are okay, or take a moment for yourself. Like you have a lot of emotions happening right now too, and all that's all very, very normal.
Yeah, that's great, guys. Dr. Swales, we have a specific question about the worry box that you talked about earlier, which I think was a great idea. But we had one parent mention that her child really sort of ruminates or perseverates on negative affect or behaviors. And so she's worried that that is just going to perpetuate that. So talked about whether you had some suggestions for more focusing on positive things like a benefits box, maybe.
I think that's a great question. Wow. So I think for your kid, it depends on how intrusive the worry is. So if your kid's having worries that are really intrusive and they're popping up kind of repeatedly all day, that's part of the benefit of the worry box, is to have somewhere to put that. And rather than letting that thought just have free range over your brain and take over whenever it wants to, we're going to isolate that, and now that's under our control and that's under your child's control. So that's kind of the basic idea behind the worry box. And so if she's generally able to cope, it's not really intrusive, it's not bringing it up excessively, let's not make her worry about it by creating worry time in a worry box if that's not something we need to do. But I do think it's also important to be able to kind of process those feelings. So even if a kid's not having those worries intrusively, but you know that kind of underlying that they're definitely there and could be maybe not expressed but are driving some behaviors, that would be a great time to set up like a high-low conversation. So maybe at the end of the day or at the end of the week, talking about, well, what were the highs this week? What were the good things? Kind of some of those benefit things that you're really wanting to highlight for your child. And then also, what were some of the lows? What were some of the things that made you feel worried or sad or whatever this week? So we can really process both of those emotions. But I also think a benefit box is such a cool idea. It'd be a great way too, because sometimes we get these negative blinders on and we kind of over focus on the negative things in our life and we forget about all the good stuff that we were experiencing during the day. And a benefit box could be a great way to help you remember and notice that stuff as it's happening. And then you can review that later and be like, oh, here are all the great things that I enjoyed today, all the positive times that I would have forgotten about if we didn't write those down.
And as the parent of a kiddo who does perseverate a lot, I will say we've had those conversations where there's a lot of anger about all of the things being missed, all of the what's happening, how is this going to impact me, and drilling down to why that perseveration's happened. I found out that after a couple hours of perseveration and having some pretty extreme emotions, found out that the real worry is that he collects Pixar cars and there's a new car being released, and he's afraid he won't be able to go to Walmart to buy that new car that's being released. And that was at the heart of all of that perseveration and worry. So sometimes, again, going back to the idea that the emotions that are coming out may be labeled something different than what they're actually about. It could be, I'm afraid I won't be able to see my grandma. It could be, I won't be able to see my school friends, and it's coming out as this other extreme emotion. But I will tell you, I'm going to do a worry box tonight because I think that would be helpful for my family and for my kiddo rates a lot.
Sorry, I was muted. All right, so a few sort of practical questions. One thing, can someone just touch on briefly? So we know that a lot of individuals who have autism may also have some underlying medical conditions that could make them more susceptible to illness. So what are the recommendations right now for keeping appointments if they have them at the hospital? Didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Well, you know, I think that's an individual decision, but I think that I would certainly advocate for determining what's essential. You call the doctor's office ahead of time, find out, well, if I come there, what are you going to do? Could you do that over telehealth? My daughter recently had surgery, and she was supposed to go in 2 weeks ago for a check, and I called and said, what are you going to do? Are you going to take out the pin in her finger? And they said, no, we're just going to unwrap it and look at it. So I said, can I do that here? And so I called the doctor's office, and they walked me through those steps. And so I do think that you have to be an advocate to minimize the risk. At the same time, I guess, you know, really determining, is it an important visit? So again, I just think it's.
And I would actually, say working with individually with your child's physicians and providers, that they're all being really, really thoughtful about that right now. So I'm part of the cystic fibrosis team, and so we're really trying to keep our kiddos home as much as possible and doing all our telehealth visits. You know, I also have patients with epilepsy, and their neurologist actually said, do not come in for any appointment, because I do not want him to get a fever. And then we have, you know, the potential for more, not that he would necessarily get sicker with COVID, but that he would have those additional seizures due to that fever. Right. And so I think just calling in advance and really talking through what the benefits and the risk is. And then we had a text comment come in that I think that actually KU, the University of Kansas Health System, has some guidance on their website as well as for when you might need to come in or not.
Yeah. All right, back to talking about telehealth or teletherapy. Do you have any specific options for providing services for adults with ASD?
I would say, unfortunately, not a lot. Through the center, I know that Sean was doing, you know, for the Autism Club for a while at Johnson County Community College, and I have young adult women in our group into their late 20s who participate in some community activities. But other than that, I know that there's often some research studies or individual consultation that goes on for self-determination, career planning, things like that. Does anyone else want to add to that?
I think if we don't have specific answers, that's something that we can certainly look into and try to provide that in our resources section when we're posting these materials online.
I would also add Catherine, that as if individuals do have specific areas where they're wanting to make connections and to seek resources as adults with autism, is to contact us at CART, and we can,
Yes.
Sean and others can work with you individually to find out the best approach and the best way to identify those resources that are needed.
Yeah, and we just had someone suggest they're familiar with OASIS training. So that is an online training that was developed by Linda Heitzman Powell, I believe, who works closely with CART. And so that can be an option for parents to work with their adult children with ASD. And so maybe we can post some information about that. All right, so we've talked a lot about how to help our children and how to help them connect with other people and deal with their emotions during this time. Can anyone talk about specific ways that parents can be connecting with one another so that they can support others who are having a difficult time or feel validated in their own emotions?
Well, first of all, I really highly recommend, if you aren't involved with Families Together. Families Together has an extensive COVID-19 resource page, and they're actively working they have a parent-to-parent program where they actively work on connecting parents with other parents to talk about exactly what you said, you know, working through difficult situations, how to validate some of the things that are going on. Likewise, myself at CART and Stephanie Coleman from Kansas Lend are both parents, and part of our role is to talk to parents about how we can help, you know, find other resources or work through some of the things we talked about today. And so we're very happy to be contacted, and we'll make sure that information is up on the COVID-19 website. We're very happy to be contacted to help you walk through any resources that you have. Also, Autism Society of the Heartland is working to connect parents and to see what parents need from them. And I think they may be working on some virtual support groups. And so contacting Autism Society of the Heartland is another group that could help you work through some of those things.
Those are great.
Some of it could be just, you know, depending on the age of your child and, you know, supervision needs and participation. You could connect with Families Together. When I was talking about the whole family connecting with another family, I think that's a sense of getting together. And if not, then a time where you have someone that is watching your child and you could connect, you know, for a virtual social hour or something too, I think would be helpful, planning that.
I really like too that I know everyone's throwing out lots of different like apps out there for social things, but people who know me know I really like Marco Polo. It's a social app that you can use, and the reason I like it is because it's asynchronous communication. So I don't necessarily like have time to set up that I can be available at the same time as like my family or friends, but it's easier for me if I can record kind of like a message from me, and it's almost like a video text message. And then when they have the time later, they look at it and respond, and we usually try to stay on a similar topic. That's a good way for me to feel connected.
Yeah, that's great.
It's the audio one too, and I do that
Yes.
a lot. And it really is nice because you don't feel pressure to set it up.
Yes, and it doesn't involve typing or needing to have any fine motor skills to do that on your phone. You can just record the message. Okay, well, we are getting to the end of our questions and the end of our time, so that worked out nicely. If we have any teachers who are involved, can you speak really briefly to ways that teachers can be supporting families right now who are missing out on the structure of school?
I mean, I think something that it depends on the school and the guidelines. I know that like my kids' schools, you don't have to show up for the WebEx meeting, you know, the teacher's available. I think that's sort of abstract. And so I think guidance would be to, you know, balance not giving people too much to do, but if it's all student-led or family-led, to give some kind of structure to being able to connect with them and opportunities to connect with their classmates or see their classmates if they wanted to, I think would be helpful.
And my son's school, again, every school district's responding a little bit differently. He has 2 Zoom opportunities with his teachers every week, and in our first Zoom, we helped kind of shape what his program is going to look like at home. And so really the concern that I had as a parent is replacing the social validation and the social opportunities he has during the day, because he's perfectly happy not to interact with anybody. And so we made an assignment that he's going to re-up his Facebook account. He's going to have an assignment to do 2 social contacts, either through text or phone call or video chat with different people every day. And then we've helped him brainstorm the list of who those people can be, many of whom are friends of his who also should be doing more social things and are getting encouragement on the other end. So really trying to build that structure and routine so that he can maintain that social validation. That's, as a parent, that was my concern. So we made that an assignment from school. He also has had opportunities through his work program at school to volunteer at nursing homes. And they all have actually really great Facebook pages, a lot of them, to keep the residents in contact with family and friends and volunteers. And so we're going to be getting on some of those, and he can video message some of the residents that he has relationships with. So just putting a structure on prioritizing what are the 2 or 3 things that your child is missing most being in school. It's probably not the academic instruction. It's probably some of the social things, and how can we replicate that as a part of that school program.
And I think like real
John,
life.
I love that example of taking care of other people as being able to connect with those nursing home residents, because like I was talking about before, we know that when you're helping kind of take care of others, that helps you feel better yourself too. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that would be my last bit of advice, is to give real, like real life assignments, right? Like how can you tie it into not just the social, to go outside and plant something and measure it, and like I think project based, and so it's not having them sit in front of the screen. More project activities.
I want to add before we sign off that
Matt needs to.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Go for it.
Matt.
Well, I don't want to interrupt Sean, and maybe this is what he was going to say. So thank you, everyone, for staying on. Clearly, we didn't rehearse this last part. Everybody has more they want to say. But I think before we do sign off, I do want to indicate that you'll receive a survey. Most of us, when we receive surveys, we hit delete. This is one where I do ask that you, if you could, pay attention to it. In particular, we want to know about the extent to which we should do more of these. And if we do more of these, what kinds of topics we should be hitting. We're trying to navigate this time and doing the best we can to provide the supports and the information that that individuals need. And so please, that feedback is important. We will read through every one of those surveys that has a response within it. So please do that. I also then want to really express, once again, some public gratitude for Sean Swindler for doing this, for Doctors Catherine Unruh, Skylar Bellinger, Renee Jameson, and Lenny Swales for wonderful presentations. I learned a lot. I hope it was helpful for everyone. And then I also want to add one more piece, and that is to stay safe and to stay hopeful, because we are going to get through this, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of you in person at some point in the near future. So we're going to sign off, but please do give us the feedback, and we'll be looking for it. And thank you for joining us.